God created a wonderful world, but we embraced evil and ruined it. God promised Abraham that through his descendants he would rescue the world from evil. He delivered the Israelites from slavery, made a covenant with them, and established them in the land, and dwelt with them in the temple, and promised David a descendant who would be Lord of the whole world. But the people broke the covenant, reversing the Exodus, losing the land, and falling back into slavery. By the close of the Hebrew Scriptures, the Babylonians were overthrown by the Persians. Unlike Pharaoh centuries earlier, the Persians allowed the Israelites to return home and to rebuild the temple. But the experience was a great disappointment. They were ruled over by others, the temple was a shadow of its former self, and the priesthood was corrupt. The promise to Abraham of worldwide blessing remained unfulfilled. The people waited for God to forgive their sins and to send the Messiah to end the exile and to usher in the new age. By the time of Jesus, messianic hopes had reached fever pitch, but the people had different ideas about how the new age would come about. Jesus polarised the nation. His extraordinary teaching and wonders proved his power, which his enemies didn't deny, but his message wasn't what the people wanted to hear. Rather than leading a military revolution, he urged the people to love their enemies. He claimed to do things that only God should do, to have authority over the law and the temple, to forgive sins, to identify God's people based on their allegiance to him, and, most disturbingly, to use the personal name of God to speak of himself. Either Jesus was the creator stepping into human history, or he was a blasphemer. And the claim of blasphemy led to his trial and execution. Since the Messiah was to rule an eternal kingdom, death proved that somebody couldn't be the Messiah. Jesus was publicly executed and his body was guarded. However, 3 days later it was claimed that he had bodily risen from the dead, and those who executed him were unable to refute the claim by producing the corpse. Jesus offered forgiveness and renewed the covenant not with the ethnic Israelites, but with anyone who would give him their allegiance. The new Exodus didn't deliver the Israelites from Roman rule, but the whole world from slavery to sin. The kingdom he established was not Jewish self-rule in Israel, but the rule of God in the whole world. He came not to restore the temple, where God had dwelt with his people, but to replace the temple with himself. Sin and evil had ruined God's wonderful world, resulting in death. Jesus went head-to-head with sin and evil, which killed him. But in his resurrection he overcame death, and thereby overcame sin and evil, proving that he had the power to rescue the world and to put everything right. Death ruled over the world, but if Jesus overcame death, then he was the world's rightful ruler. Through his death and resurrection, sin and evil and death were undone. The promises to Abraham were fulfilled, and salvation and blessing could flow out from Israel to the whole world. For us, the implications are huge. Jesus' new covenant is with anyone who will trust in Jesus and give him their allegiance. To come into that covenant, people, is to receive forgiveness and new life. A life no longer enslaved to sin and death, but lived in the kingdom of God under the rule of Jesus. We become part of the people through whom God is reaching out to the whole world with forgiveness and healing. We're promised that when Jesus returns to banish sin and evil from his world, he'll raise us from death and bring us safely into his renewed creation.